And it is time now for a motion to adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson. All right, I want to say good afternoon to you, Chris, and guest.
Good afternoon, Brother Dawn. Can you hear me?
Loud and clear. Your guest is online as well.
Yes. Good afternoon, Speaker. Madam Speaker.
Good afternoon, Chris. How are you?
All right. And Mr. Weber, are you there? Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon, Bermuda. Today we have a very informative conversation. We have online two prominent persons, Mr. Anthony Weber, MP from Guernsey, and former MP from Guernsey. And we also have Miss Shirley Osbourne, who's no stranger to this station, a former Speaker of the House of Montserrat. Good evening, good afternoon to you all.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
Mr. Weber, how are you doing today?
Oh, not bad. It's been annoying that this issue of parliamentary representation has been put on the back burner for nearly 2 years because of the COVID situation in the UK. So
okay.
A lot of political... Yes.
So before we go any further, I just want to... Speaker Osbourne, are you hearing me?
I'm hearing you loud and clear, yes.
Okay. So, Mr. Weber, what I want to do is give you the opportunity to explain what your proposal was, because once people in the overseas territories actually heard about it, we were kind of, I would say, a little perturbed. Let me put that gently. And we want to give you a chance to explain what this is all about, or at least what the proposal is. So I'll let you take a few minutes to elaborate on that.
Well, thank you very much, Chris. It's not that new a proposal because it was mentioned over a couple of years ago, but people have probably forgotten about it. At that time, it was circulated to most of the elected representatives of the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies parliaments. But basically, it isn't anything to do with the parliaments of the overseas territories or the Crown dependencies, because it's an electoral franchise matter, and it's a matter for the UK Parliament to decide on who should be MPs, who should vote for them, and all issues of constituencies and so on. But the whole idea is that for some time there's been concern that the UK is the only country which doesn't allow its overseas citizens the opportunity to vote for MPs in the national parliaments. Because, as you know, the French overseas territories all send representatives to the French National Parliament. The same actually applies with Denmark, and with Holland they also do the same, a slightly different system. But the whole point is to give people the right to vote for MPs. So although we've got a proposed bill which gives the overseas territories and the Crown dependencies effectively 9 MPs based on population in relation to how UK MPs are allocated, it is just one of many options, because other options include being able to vote for a UK MP in a constituency in the UK, or just to have a general pool system like they have with the Netherlands. So although I think most people would prefer to have constituency MPs, the main point is to actually have an MP who you can actually approach, because most people in the overseas territories and crown dependencies will be aware that they can't actually ask an MP in the UK to do anything for them, because UK MPs are only allowed to help their own constituents. So if an issue comes up with Montserrat or Bermuda or Guernsey or Jersey, no MP is officially allowed to help. So it's a big problem. And of course, what we have at the moment with, as you'll know, with Bermuda, the UK is the sovereign government, and as such, it's responsible for defence and foreign affairs. It's also got wider responsibilities under the terminology of good governance. But we all know recently that the UK Parliament can legislate for whatever it wants. It just chooses generally not to do that. So we had the issue of the beneficial ownership, transparency, and there was going to be a parliamentary vote on that. But what's happened is, because of the threat of that, all the overseas territories have agreed to have publicly accessible registers. But we have a situation where, because the UK is the sovereign nation, basically the Parliament in the UK can decide what they want, and that includes matters of war. So this issue first came up when the UK went to war in Iraq, because people were concerned they didn't have a chance to speak with any MPs because they didn't have any. So people in the overseas territories and crown dependencies who were serving in the armed forces, their people back home had no MP to speak on their behalf. If you look at the situation in the UK, where there is, we've got separate governments for Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland. Now, they have very similar powers to the powers which the overseas territories and crown dependencies have. Now, they still have MPs elected to Westminster. So overseas territories and crown dependencies having the right to vote for MPs would be similar to that, and it would in no way, shape or form affect any of the autonomous arrangements those governments have. So the status of the overseas territories would not be affected one iota. Now, if you look at the issue of voting, at the moment, there are thousands of people in the overseas territories and crown dependencies who already have the right to vote for MPs because of what's known as a 15-year rule, which is going to be extended to be even better. So what we have is a situation where we've got a proportion of the population who already can vote for MPs, and then a bigger proportion of the population who can't. So it's patently unfair to have some people in the overseas territories and crown dependencies who can vote for MPs and some who can't. And I would sort of add, because a lot of people don't know this, that all the crown officers in the overseas territories and crown dependencies have the right to vote for MPs. So the number of people who can vote is quite numerous. It's in the thousands. So I think that is it in a nutshell. It certainly would help situations like the Balkans, when the Falklands were invaded. If somebody else other than Margaret Thatcher had been the Prime Minister, it may well have been that nobody would have stood up for the Falkland Islands, whereas if we have overseas territories and crown dependencies MPs, there would be a block of MPs who would speak up for them. Then you've got the Gibraltar situation, and of course another similar situation there. So it's all to do with giving people the right to vote. It's not forcing people to vote, and I notice in a lot of the elections recently in Montserrat and Bermuda, the turnout's been sort of 65-ish%. So a big proportion of people have decided not to vote. But if you look at the UK, for instance, the last election in 2019, 67% turnout. So you're talking about only 2/3 of people turned out to vote. But the worst scenario was that was of people registered to vote. So you actually had about 9 million people who weren't even registered to vote. So that's another issue. But what I'm talking about is, on this issue of a right to vote for MPs is basically putting right or wrong, because everyone should have equal rights to vote for an MP. And it's been an anomaly for many years to treat overseas citizens in the overseas territories and crown dependencies effectively as second-class citizens, because we're now in a very much smaller world. We're in the global Britain world, and we can't sort of carry on in a situation where people don't have the rights to vote for an MP in their sovereign parliament. And of course, Bermuda had a referendum only a few years ago to decide to remain as a British overseas territory. So they should have the rights as any other citizens of the British citizens, and that is to vote for an MP. But I think that's probably covered the main points. If there are any questions, obviously, I can answer them.
All right, thank you for that. Madam Speaker, do you have any questions or your thoughts on what was spoken about?
A lot was said. I couldn't. I wouldn't know where to begin. I think the basic question I would have for Mr. Webber, how are you, sir? Is
hello. I don't know if you can speak up a bit, because it's not a brilliant line for me hearing you.
Okay, can you hear me better now?
Yes, no, that's great.
Okay, good. I was saying there's so much here that it's difficult to know where to begin. But I think the burning question for me has been, more than anything, given if this were to happen, what would that mean for the government in the territories themselves? What would that mean for the authority of government? Having an MP in the UK, in the British Parliament, would mean what? How would that affect the authority of the members of Parliament in the territories?
Well, I think it's obviously a matter which the UK Parliament have got to sort out, because if you look at the history of enfranchisement, even in the 19th century, a lot of people were not allowed to vote. And of course, women were only enabled to vote in the 20th century. So it's a period of constant evolvement. And, obviously, if people don't want to vote, they don't have to. But it seems wrong for British citizens, because we're supposed to treat British citizens exactly the same, whether they're in Montserrat, Bermuda, Guernsey or Jersey. We should be giving them the same rights. And at the moment, they don't have an MP they can approach on any issue to do with major affairs which affect them. And of course, yes, they're all lucky in that most of the overseas territories' governments are pretty good, a bit democratic systems. And I notice in Montserrat you've got a similar system to what they have in Albany, which is quite unique. Having all... well, I won't go into it because that's your sort of matter, but I think throughout the overseas territories and crown dependencies, we've got some very unique electoral systems. And for instance, in Guernsey, we have 36 members of the Guernsey states all voted in one go. So the public votes for every single one of their deputies. They don't have to vote for sort of two or three in a constituency basis because the whole island is a constituent. A bit like Montserrat in a way, but on a bigger scale. But I think all I can say is when I was a member of the Guernsey States, which was 13 years up until 2004, and then I became a political commentator, I never really thought much about the Constitution or the relationship with the UK. But it was only sort of the last few years when I've been talking to various people about the subject, and I've gone to various political party conferences in the UK to report on them. And indeed, I met one or two people from Montserrat at these conferences. But I've sort of realised that we've got a big inequality with this lack of representation in respect of MPs. So it's something which does need a lot of discussion, and I agree there's a lot there. The problem is there's a backlog of things to be considered in the UK Parliament, and this will obviously be considered at some stage, but at the moment I don't know when.
Yeah, Chris, if I may just kind of follow up, Mr. Weber, I think the issue is, I think I can say this without fear of much contradiction, is that members, the overseas territories, governments from the Caribbean at any rate, have been concerned for a number of years about declining authority in our parliaments, about authority, these new constitutions that we've had foisted upon us. I think I can use that word, especially in regard to Montserrat.
Madam Speaker, we're just going to go to a news break, and then we'll come back and you continue on from there.
Okay. Okay, so I hold my question.
An organic food company, a family business who've been producing wholesome and flavorful foods over 30 years. From their first pot pie right up to 1 million meals a day, and firmly believe in the importance of TLC throughout the entire process. This month we're featuring a range of Amy's organic beans, refried and baked, chilies, medium, spicy and beyond, and a multitude of organic soups, minestrone, chunky tomato bisque, cream of mushroom, hearty Thai coconut, and much more. Lindo's, why go anyplace else?
You're locked to Power 95, Bermuda's big station, at 94.9 FM, a Bermuda Broadcasting Company station.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gray Miners with Bermuda Broadcasting News with your top stories to the hour, brought to you by Butterfield.
Research, trade, and manage your investments anytime, anywhere with Butterfield's self-directed online brokerage. Invest and trade stocks in real time independently, or speak with Butterfield's team of experienced advisors who can provide professional guidance on investment decisions to help you realize your financial goals. Contact us via email at invest@butterfieldgroup.com or call us on 299-3817 to get started. Your platform for growth. This is Investments by Butterfield. Butterfield Asset Management Limited is licensed to conduct investment business by the Bermuda Monetary Authority.
Bermuda residents have been defrauded of nearly $4 million in the past year due to fraudulent online schemes. The Bermuda Police Service is reporting now an increase in scammers using social media to target victims since the pandemic. Detective Superintendent Nicholas Pedro says reporting suspected fraud early is important in helping to recover lost funds. Schools have been on the strictest coronavirus protocols since early this week, just as cases among children have risen. On the same day government tightened restrictions, the health minister also warned that some children had been sent back to school before their test results revealed they were positive for the virus. Meanwhile, the teachers' union has called the current surge in cases a severe concern and questions the wisdom of government's handling of schools during this outbreak. Fans of political intrigue are transfixed by events unfolding in London. Prime Minister Boris Johnson's job appears to be on the line thanks to revelations in the media about social gatherings that allegedly broke COVID lockdown rules. Meanwhile, the UK will stop requiring vaccinated travelers to take a COVID-19 test after arriving in England as part of the general easing of restrictions. And those were your top stories to the hour, brought to you by Butterfield.
And now back to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
Hello, welcome back to this intriguing debate. Speaker Shirley, are you there?
Yes, I am here, Chris.
Okay. I also want to introduce one of my co-hosts, Dwayne Robinson. He's on the line as well. How you doing, Dwayne?
Hi, greetings all. I'm just enjoying the conversation.
Hi, Dwayne.
Thanks for letting me in.
Yeah. So Dwayne will be Dwayne's was a senator and he's going to be an MP one day. So all of this is a university lesson for him as well. So, sorry, go ahead, Speaker Shirley, with your question.
Yeah, okay, so I take Mr. Weber's point about the importance of people being able to vote in the places and on the matters that are important to them. But I think, and I think one of the challenges, one of the issues for us is that whole issue of, are we British? Are we really, I'm not sure I know too many people in the overseas territories who consider themselves fully British. It's on paper, but I'm not sure. And I like he says, they're treated like second-class citizens, and that's part of what we feel. However, there is also the issue of culture and ownership and people wanting to be Caribbean and be Bermudan and Monthrasian. And the concern for us is that there are those concerns, but with regard to the involvement and the engagement with Britain, we've had over the last 20, 30 years, the general sentiment has been that there is a concerted effort on the part of the British government to reduce the power and the authority of local governments. I mean, the constitutions that we've been handed down over the last few years tell that story. I mean, I've spoken with British MPs and so on. One British man asked me, how on earth did Montserrat let itself be given a constitution that in the 21st century? We got that in 2010. And so when I hear talk about increasing the representation in England specifically, in the UK Parliament, of course the question is, combine that with the reduction in authority of ministers at home, it seems to us that, and it seems justified for us to be concerned that what's happening is that we are being moved away from having any authority in our own territories, and that's a serious concern. And that's what I'd like you to address, Mr. Weber. And I know, like you said, a lot of it would be. It would depend on the British Parliament. The same British Parliament would have to vote on that. The same British Parliament which has handed down things like the directory, the beneficial ownership directory. How do you recommend that we manage that particular issue?
Over to you, Mr. Weber. Yes.
Yeah, sure. Well, I think we've got to look at the current situation where there are a lot of MPs who are friends of the overseas territories and crown dependencies, and a number of them sit on particular committees which assist the overseas territories, and some of the larger territories do actually have London offices. But it's been said to me numerous times that it's not the same as having an MP, because an MP is talking to fellow MPs on an equal basis and giving direct experience of the situation in their locality. And of course, one of the proposals is that Montserrat would have an MP shared with a couple of other places, including the BVI, Leeward Islands constituency. And I think the whole purpose is not to affect powers at all, and any movement towards giving the overseas territories more powers, that would be nothing to do with having MPs, because MPs' role is a different one. It's the same as the Scottish government were recently given some more powers, but it didn't affect the role of MPs because it's a different role. It's the same as if you look at the United States, you've got the role of the senators, and of course, in the United States, you've got all the different states with their own separate legislatures. So I think it's a question of putting things in context, as long as it's understood that there wouldn't be any concerns about, local powers going, because I think most people believe that there should be as much local responsibility as possible. But whilst you stay in a sovereign nation situation, and all the overseas territories and crown dependencies accept the UK government as their sovereign government, then that government has to have some sort of overview, and that government is responsible for the interests of all of those overseas territories. So,
but could that not
being practical? And at the moment, I don't think anyone could argue that the British government gives a huge amount of power to the overseas territories and crown dependencies, and that's been the situation for many, many years. But it's been at the disadvantage of the people in the overseas territories not having any rights in respect of MPs. And there's no reason why they shouldn't have rights in MPs and have MPs to approach, because it's not going to affect the constitutional relationship of their government with the UK government. It's something totally different. So hopefully that's at least a partial explanation of what Shirley has mentioned.
Any other questions, Speaker Osbourne?
Yeah, in
I
terms
get
of
to play
sharing
Speaker
MPs,
today.
the question of sharing
Good
MPs,
one.
the question I have to ask
I was going to say, I think it's a compliment for, I think Shirley was elected as Speaker by her colleagues in Montserrat, so that's a supreme compliment, isn't it?
Oh, I didn't hear. What did I miss?
No, we were saying I was cracking a joke to say that I get to play Speaker today, so it's your turn to you now have the floor.
Thank you. Yes, I just have just one more question on this particular point. The issue of sharing MPs. I mean, I have family in British Virgin Islands. I have family in Anguilla. You know, we're all one people, really, but the islands the territories have some differences and different needs and requirements. And so, one of the questions that we had in Montserrat, for example, was who would be this person who would know Montserrat well enough and the BVI well enough and Anguilla well enough to advocate well enough for us? And, of course, the other issue is, who will be able to vote and who will be able to run for office. And so if in the middle of this, the people being able to vote wherever and whenever, of course, the person who is going to be representing us in the UK Parliament would be, the big question about that. And so would it not be easier and much more useful, much more helpful if, for example, the premiers of the overseas territories had greater access to members of Parliament? Does it necessarily need to be another person voted in? So the Premier of Montserrat, the Premier of Bermuda would have clear, direct access to whoever they need to have, and maybe or maybe not the FCDO. But would that not be easier and more reassuring for us in the overseas territories, even, Mr. Weber?
Well, I think you're sort of effectively saying that the citizens of the Crown dependencies, the overseas territories, should be treated differently to British citizens in the United Kingdom. And I think wouldn't sort of agree with that. I think they should be treated as exactly the same. I think it's important to. I'll ask Chris to send through to you some of the information I sent through to the studio. But one of the main proposals is that when there's a general election put forward in the UK, that general election applies to all the overseas territories and Crown dependencies at the same time. So it's the same as what happened. The French do the same, and so the Danish. If there's an general election, it applies everywhere. And the same with a referendum, because you'll remember that the UK had a referendum on whether to stay or leave the EU, and only Gibraltar was included in that referendum, whereas the French and the Danish include their citizens and their overseas territories in referendums. So it's another issue which needed to be put right. But the whole purpose is you have to treat the citizens and you have to treat the MPs the same. But one thing I would say is we've also suggested that one thing which could happen immediately, and that is that citizens of the overseas territories and Crown dependencies should be made members of the House of Lords and Privy Councillors, because that is something which could happen immediately. And that would give a better voice to the overseas territories. It's certainly something in the French parliamentary system. The overseas territories have representation in the upper house as well as the lower house. And we have, across the overseas territories and Crown dependencies, some really intelligent, really informed people. So we've got a lot of people who would qualify and be probably better members of the House of Lords than some of the people we've got in at the moment. And, a lot of people don't know that there are literally hundreds of privy councillors. And, again, Privy Councillors get involved with matters to do with the overseas territories and crown dependencies, yet we effectively don't have any at the moment. So I would argue that if we are all British citizens and we want to be considered the same as British citizens, then it's not just the House of Commons that we should have representation. It's the House of Lords, which we know is close on about 900 members at the moment, and the Privy Councillors. So it's the whole system which needs to be looked at. But I bet you if people were listening, they would think of some really good quality people in their own territory. I can think of one or two people in Bermuda who would be good to be in the House of Lords. So why shouldn't they be? Because the House of Lords is an important part of the UK British democratic system. But anyway, I think that's what I should say for the moment.
All right. MP Robinson, do you have anything to this contribution to this debate?
Yeah, promoted me. I just was very interested in
you got to speak up, Dwayne.
Okay. Sorry, can you hear me now?
You're not talking to me, are you? Or are you talking to somebody else?
No, I'm speaking, there's a third person on the phone call.
All right, yeah.
Dwayne, you need to speak up a bit.
Can you hear me now?
Barely.
Well, I just was pretty much asking along the same lines as the speaker, as far as, with different people and demographics of each OT, if you have one person that's representing a few, I think it probably would be more plausible if you had like a direct line, like she was saying, Ms. Osbourne was saying, to the premiers, because what might happen is if you set up an electoral system, it might favor the larger OTs, because if all of us have got a representation and we all vote for somebody from our individual overseas territory, we may end up voting in people from the same OT over and over. So I think, working through the premiers is probably the best bet to assure that every overseas territory is got their specific issues heard, because if not, it could result in us kind of squabbling amongst ourselves if a representative is obviously prioritizing Bermudian issues because he's from Bermuda, and one from Montserrat that gets in is prioritizing Montserrat issues. So I think to preserve unity in the OTs, it would be more plausible to work through the premiers and give them a direct link to the MPs and the Prime Minister of the UK and work on that relationship first.
All right, thank you. Mr. Speaker and Mr. Weber, did you hear Dwayne clearly?
Yes.
Unfortunately,
Yes.
the line was so bad I didn't hear anything. So if you could give a brief summary of what he said.
The basic synopsis is, according to the proposal that I read that you sent me, there was supposed to be one MP representing Anguilla, BVI, and Montserrat. And as the speaker alluded to, that simply cannot work, because there are three different islands with three different subcultures, if you would say, and BVI has a electorate of 10,000 persons. Anguilla has an electorate of 11,000 persons, and Montserrat has an electorate of 3,800 persons. So immediately, if everyone from Montserrat voted, they would still not be voted for an MP. They would still lose out, because the other islands have 4 or 5 times, 2 and 3 times more electors, voters.
Yes,
right?
I understand that, but it's like Guernsey has Guernsey and Alderney has only got about 2,000 people living in it, it would have to be part of the Guernsey makeup, and people would argue that the Alderney people and Guernsey people are slightly different. I think you have to make compromises, but if you do look at UK constituents, they generally constituencies are about 70,000 plus, and you can find major differences between the temperaments and characteristics of some of the people in those constituencies, even when they're sort of only a few miles away. And the only answer to Shirley's problem is effectively to do what the French do, which is to give every single jurisdiction their own MP. Now, I'm not against that. I'm not against there being 3 MPs for that area as opposed to 1. But the only reason we suggested that was to try and be practical as to what would be acceptable to the House of Commons, because the 9 MPs was based on the UK population as is used to have an MP. So, for instance, Guernsey has got a population of about 68,000, so it would slightly underqualify to have an MP. And then you've got Jersey, which is about 110,000, which would overqualify. But this is the case throughout the UK.
We're going to go to a break, and then we come back and continue, and we have to wrap it up. So we're going to go to a quick break, and then we come back.
At AirCare, we understand the importance of indoor air quality, especially during a pandemic. So take control with our Phi Mini Split Air Purifier. The Phi mounts directly onto your existing Mini Split AC unit with no modifications required. By recreating nature's process, our Phi Air Purifier reduces airborne and surface bacteria, molds, allergens, and viruses, including the coronavirus. Protect your health and the health of those you love the most. Learn more at aircare.bm.
We now return to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.
Yes, sir.
Well, the good news and bad news is we're running out of time. The good news is we're going to have to come back with this conversation. This could never be a one-time conversation. We'll have to come back to this conversation in the near future. Let me before I allow closing remarks, let me ask this question, Mr. Weber. Does this proposal have strong support amongst MPs in the House of Commons?
Yes, it was growing in support, and I actually sent you a copy of a letter from Andrew Rosendale MP, who's very well known amongst the Crown dependencies and overseas territories, and he totally agrees with the approach on this as to how to get the representation. But the problem is the issue has been forgotten about for 2 years because of the pandemic. So it's now coming back on the agenda, and hopefully we can get a lot more debate on the issues. And I think what Shirley said was quite a relevant point. You know, some people will think on those lines, but at the end of the day, the issue is to get people with the right to vote. So how many MPs there are and how their constituencies are made up is perhaps a secondary issue, but it's still an important one.
Well, I'll Speaker Shirley, I'll let you give some closing remarks, and then Dwayne, then I'll give my remarks.
Okay, thanks, Chris. I believe in democracy, and I believe in the right to vote. I also believe that exercising that right must bring some benefits, some real tangible benefits. And if you've not had it and then you get the right to vote, then the question has to be what new is going to come, what new and better. And, I take Mr. Webber's point about British citizens all being treated equally. But there is also, when we hear about people talking about global Britain, for example, Mr. Webber, you must have heard this. One of the questions that has been asked is this colonialism 2.0? Because, there is representation and there is also ownership. And the question is, are we going to be moving backwards in some ways? And would that moving backwards bring any greater benefit for today? So, those are things that I'm concerned about, and different is not necessarily worse. Different is just different. So you can be treated differently and not be treated any worse. And I think I can say this also, that we like being Caribbean people. We like being Bermuda and Monstration and BVI Islanders. We accept that we are also British, and we figure that there must be a way that those two things can work together for us and for Britain without us having to lose or give up any more of the autonomy and anything that we have, our people have really fought for centuries to get. So there are those things that I'm hoping that the British MPs, Mr. Webber and everybody else, will take that into consideration when you think of making decisions for and thinking about what would work for the people in the overseas territories. Those things are important to us, and they must be factored into any decision that is being made.
Thank you, Speaker Osbourne. MP Robinson.
I totally agree, and I think for me, the aspect of this is intriguing. But I think the main focus has to be, no matter how it shakes out or how it ends up, that the local elected officials are empowered by this particular decision, or however we intend to do this protocol, because I think that is what most folks in the OTs are concerned about. I can't speak for everybody, but I'll speak for myself. We want to maintain, faith in our own local governments. So it has to be one of those situations where it's a give and a take per se, but the crux of it is a stronger relationship that satisfies the autonomy of our elected officials to basically chart the course that is in the best interest of our respective OTs. So I think I'm not opposed to it, but I do think that seeing it ironed out and seeing certain give and takes and details worked out between, the representatives of the OTs and the UK, I think it would put a lot of qualms to rest. But again, my closing remarks are, whatever it shakes out to be, the local elected MPs and the local premiers, they need to be at the focus of this sort of relationship between the UK and the OT territory.
All right, thank you, Dwayne. My closing remarks to everyone is simple. You have a proposal that affects, there are 300,000 persons in the overseas territories. Speaker Shirley and Dwayne could testify that the overseas territories governments are working extremely close together. And I've spoken to almost every premier in the overseas territories, at least in the Caribbean region, and no one's been approached with this. So what I would suggest is you have to have some buy-in from the local electorate, else essentially what is being proposed is a form of, well, this is what London is proposing, and this is what you all have to accept. And we're really not in that mood right now. So what I would say, Mr. Weber, is that we would like to continue this conversation perhaps next month sometime. But it essentially has anything going forward has to have buy-in from us. It has to have some sort of consultation. I shouldn't say some sort. It has to have consultation with us as the people of the overseas territories. Hello? Hello?
Oh, he should be still there. I still hear the tone.
Hello, Mr. Rebel. Speaker Shirley, are you there?
I'm still here, yes.
Dwayne, are you there?
Yeah, I'm still here.
Okay. Well, so in closing, I said my part. You can't. We are not getting back into colonialism where London's just telling us what they're gonna do to us or for us, right? You know what I mean? This proposal might have merits. I'm not going to be totally dismissive, but unless there's communication between us and there's proposing it or there's legislating it, it's colonialism.
Yep.
So we have to continue this conversation next month sometime. Thank you, Speaker Shirley.
You're welcome, Chris. Thank you for having me. Thank you. Just let me know.
All right. Brother Dwayne?
Yes, sir.
Thank you once again. How's the young one?
Oh, he's doing good. He's doing really well. Thank you for having
me. All right. And thank you to the people of Bermuda. Next week's show, we're going to have a special treat. We're going to have Elder Joy Wilson Tucker, who's going to be talking about Bermudian family connections.
Sorry,
so next week, February 3rd, we'll be having special guest Joy Wilson Tucker, who's going to be talking about Bermudian family connections. Brother Dorn, thank you.
Thank you, sir. Have a good evening. And you have been listening to Motion to Adjourn with MP Chris Famous and Dwayne Robinson.